Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It is me, your host, Joe Slepsky, captain of this Joe on Joe ship, and you're back for another episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. Now, last week we covered the Saturday Morning Adventures issue number 2. Well, this week we're back to retro, and we're covering 1992's G.I. Joe number 122. The Ninja Wars continue. Silent Castle Destro is what I guess we'll call this one. The ninja action never stops flowing, and the repeat of the same Destro story that we just wrapped up never stops. No, I'm just kidding. It's kind of a continuation, but we're going to get to that. No, it's exciting. It's exciting times, and Edwin Wildman is back, and he's firing on all cylinders, and G.I. Joe, all is good in the world. Snake Eyes is still wearing his dog face outfit. That's what I call that mask with the red eyes and the dog catcher mask or whatever that was. Yeah, so that's what we're going to cover today. Before we start getting into that, listeners, thanks so much for being a listener. Thanks for following me on socials at Joe on Joe Pod. Thanks for following our sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie? It's about not 2 movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
At Movies and a Meal. They're fabulous. They make the show roll. You make the show roll. Our Patreons make the show roll. Patrons on the Patreon. Our patrons on the Patreon make this show happen. You can go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and see how you can help contribute to the show. And remember, we're getting geared up for Cobra Convergence coming this summer. Cobra Convergence 6. Cutting across all forms of not Joe and Joe media, G.I. Joe media, from podcasts to YouTube channels to what have you. A lot of people participating in Cobra Convergence, and that is heralded by our tremendous leader in the effort, Hooded Cobra Commander, Brian Lauer. So we appreciate him, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Now, last week, there was a bit of a cliffhanger. I was on jury duty. Boy, was I not happy about it. And as when I came home Tuesday and I told Toilet Teal, hey, I'm an alternate juror. One of the things she said, she looked at me and said, by the end of the week, you're not only going to be on the jury, you're going to be the foreman. And as if she were looking at Crystal Ball's ball, by the end of the week, I was not only a member of the jury, but they chose me to be the foreman. And it's over, so I can talk about it. So let me just say, without getting into some of the nitty-gritty details, let me give you some of the top notes, everybody. First of all, if you're someone who is choosing to not pay rent I'm not going to judge you for that choice. I think that's a bad choice, but I'm not going to sit here and judge you for that. I know every situation is different, but if you're in earshot and you're making the choice to not pay rent for whatever reason, what you should not be stupid enough to do is you should not give your landlord a reason to get you kicked out that has nothing to do with your rent. When there's rent control and COVID control and all the various ways that you know, the cities, especially LA, they give protections to the tenants, which are, you know, usually good, and, you know, tenant favor and all that stuff. That's all good stuff. But don't flaunt the system by cutting a hole in your front door without consent and not repairing that hole when you're asked to, because I wouldn't have had to waste a week if this person just fixed the hole in their door. They still wouldn't have been paying rent, and that's a whole nother lawsuit. But the simple matter of cutting a hole, literally cutting a hole in the front door so your dog can walk in and out of your house, if you're so stupid as you don't do that, and you don't fix it when you're asked to fix it, then they don't have a cudgel to get you evicted. But in this case, it took us 4 days of listening to how terrible of a neighbor / roommate you were, and then less than 5 minutes to deliberate about it, because it was obvious to everyone in the court from pretty much day one that you were guilty. So that's how I wasted my week. Yeah. Also, throwing this out there, this is my first experience on a jury duty, and I don't understand why juries are not paid minimum wage. They're going to throw that out there. I really, really genuinely don't, especially for civil cases. I don't understand, because they're the most important people in the courtroom, and you start the whole week with those 12 people being very, very upset / bothered / whatever emotion you want to fill in, because their time is not being valued. As the judge, as the lawyer, as the plaintiff, as the defendant, as the clerk, as the bailiff, as blah, 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 blah. It seems like a glaring hole in justice these days, and maybe that would keep some people who are currently finding every creative way to shirk jury duty. Maybe that would keep them on, because they would know, well, at least I get paid. So that's my thoughts. I have some deeper thoughts on that, some intricacies. Toilet Teal and I actually differ on that subject. I carve out a path for civil trials versus criminal, whereas what's considered your social duty. Because I'm sorry, just because two people can't get it together over a hole in the door means I got to waste a week of my life. I'm not very pleased with that. So, but listen, the judge was great. The court clerk guy was awesome. The jury was fun. Like, we all enjoyed each other. But wow, what a waste of a week. Anyway, that was a new experience for me, guys. It really was. It was I'm 46 years old, and I've been on it, but I've never actually been called in to do it. I've like had to call in, and they said we don't need you, and never had to actually go in person. So this was a new experience, and one I hope to not repeat. Yeah. So, you know, there you go. So that's it. That's my jury rant. I'm sure there's a PSA out there about jury duty and how it's my constitutional duty to make sure that we live in a free society. And then Hawk would yell at me for being greedy. But and now I know, and knowing is half the battle.
You were saying?
Now, we were talking about G.I. Joe 122. And this has a cover date of January 1992. So our segment, you were saying, for you new listeners, is where we look at other comic books that were on the shelf this same month as G.I. Joe 122. So you're grabbing 122 off the shelf and sharing shelf space with it. Over at DC Comics was Action Comics number 675, Adventures of Superman 488, and Superman, what's the Superman number here? Superman issue number 65. Oh, and Man of Steel number 9. That's right. There were up to 4 Superman issues. So those 4 Superman issues were on the shelf, and they were all part of the Panic in the Sky crossover, where Brainiac was involved and showing up in full force. Now, Brainiac was, when I think of all the characters that they rebooted in the John Byrne 1986 led reboot, I think Brainiac was the one that got muddled the most. For the Superman, people, I'm not even touching Hawkman. Where I think to point fingers, or to not point fingers really, but in Byrne / Roger Stern / Jerry Ordway, in their method, while they were trying to kind of refine all aspects of Brainiac's history, because remember he was because he started out as a mentalist, and then he was an alien conqueror, and then he was in the early 80s they just rebuilt him as a robot, the one that was like in the superpowers era, and so they were kind of trying to make a version of Brainiac that was all of that, instead of doing what I think they did successfully with characters like Luthor, like Superman himself, and just strip it down to the core, and then whatever trappings you put around it didn't matter. So we would still accept him for being Brainiac or being Luthor and Superman, because whether he's the Mogul or Superman's not as alien as he first originally was, it was still Superman, because at his core it was based around this pure essence of what we came to think of as Superman and Luthor. With Brainiac, they tried to cram in every iteration of gold and silver. Let me think. I think it might have. I'm not sure if he was actually in any golden stuff, but I think early silver was his first appearances. But they tried to cram in all the revisions into what Brainiac actually was, instead of just coming out of the gate strong and saying, "Here's this guy named Brainiac. He's from Kolu. He's a conqueror. He's green, or not, or he's a robot, or whatever." Instead of just making that choice and saying he's here to capture your planets, they started out with having him take over the mind of a mentalist on Earth, and so it was like this mind control. So that slow kind of build reveal that literally happened over 6 years, I don't think helped the character. For my money, it was when. And I do think that it plays out this way, but not on a conscious choice. It was when the animated series got Brainiac right, and they said, nope, he was the AI for Krypton that was from Kolu, but it was part of the explosion of Krypton, and that's why he's into Superman. He is about preserving planets, and so even his original mission statement is somewhat noble. It's just he takes it too far, and and that's what he is. Like the animated series version of Brainiac, I think is a real strong version of Brainiac. But they were trying to have their cake and eat it too. So Panic in the Sky is a big Brainiac story, and that kind of gets you. This finally gets you back to this global Brainiac, interstellar Brainiac menace, and it took only. Issue 65, what is that, 5 years? It took only 5 years of storytelling to get there, which is a little tough. Having said that, the Panic in the Sky story is really cool. Superman 65 has a great cover that's been I think they made a poster of it. It's been used. It gets used, when they're talking about this era a lot, because it's Superman leading the charge, and you've got Batman, Deathstroke, the Terminator, Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Captain Marvel, Shazam, who is that? Oh, the Guardian, got Aquaman, and then the Patriot, I think his name was. They just had his special was the previous month. Did we talk about it? I'm sorry, Agent Liberty, that was his name. Yeah, Agent Liberty's on that cover, but it's like all of them. It's a fun cover. So that was a big Panic in the Sky crossover that was going on in the Superman books, and it's a fun read. It's actually similar to the stuff that was going down over at Marvel, and we'll talk about that in a second, with their big cosmic crossover in the Avengers books. Starman is up to issue 44. It's got a beautiful Mike Mignola cover. This is the Will Payton Starman version. He does not have that many more issues left. We're getting closer and closer to the Starman reboot, which is just seminal and amazing, and can't wait to talk about that. Justice League is in breakdowns. This might be near the final issue. It's got a great Kevin Maguire cover, Blue Beetle with a belly, which is always fantastic. There's a lot of it's a good time for DC, but it's just a lot of middling stuff. It's a lot of stuff that pays off dividends later. or it's just actually, let me change this, rephrase that. This is an era that's post big dividends. So these are the follow-up creators to some of the creators that really changed the game. So you're in this era of Animal Man post Grant Morrison, Doom Patrol post Grant Morrison, right? Oh no, he's actually still writing it, but he's going to be leaving it soon. But he's been on Doom Patrol for 30 some issues. It's kind of a come down era, but there's still some good stuff to be had in here for sure. In Detective Comics 642, it's the Batman villain Scarface, who not only do I love, it's probably one of the greatest modern, probably edged out by Harley Quinn rather. But without Harley Quinn, I think probably Scarface is the best modern rogues gallery. Yeah, I guess people would say Bane. Okay, listen, I'm not here to rank, but he's one of the greatest villains that's been created for the Batman universe in the last 30 years. And he would be, what I'm trying to get to is, he would have absolutely been in place on the 66 Batman show. That would have been dynamite.
You were saying?
Now over at Marvel, big issue. Not because it was deftly handled. So let me get this out of the way. Alpha Flight 106. This is the North Star screaming on the front cover about just how gay he is. It is the coming out issue. It was a really important issue at the time. It made all kinds of news. It is not handled subtly. It's not. It's about as subtle as an elephant's. But it was a big deal. It was a big. It absolutely was all over the news at the time. Superhero comes out as gay, and what's funny is that he was North Star rather is the speedster on the Team Alpha Flight up in Canada, and he was coded homosexual from his first appearance. John Byrne talks about it. He certainly said it in interviews, but it is, and Claremont did. They were talking about the X-Men books. It is not subtle. It's not subtle at all in the first ones. His longtime friend and this and that, but Marvel wouldn't let them actually put name to it. And so this is the issue that was it Jean Paul? Yeah, sister's name is Jean Marie, right? And he's Jean Paul, but it's North Star. This is the issue that he actually says it out loud, and he screams it. Google the panel. It's pretty funny, in that regard. But it's a groundbreaking issue, And listen, not everything is handled as with a deft hand. Sometimes you just gotta pop on through and get to the other side of it, right? Over in Avengers 345 and West Coast Avengers 80, this is the book I referenced earlier, the Galactic Storm crossover. This was a huge crossover at the time, especially at the time. I mean, it's still big by today's standards, but then you get some of these X crossovers and stuff where there's, with all the 4-issue miniseries involved, it's a 36-part crossover. So a 12 or 13-part Galactic Storm crossover seems kind of quaint. But this was, the top note of it is Avengers in space, and it's the Shi'ar Empire fighting the Skrull Empire. Forever, it was always Kree Skrulls, and now they brought the Shi'ar into this cosmic war, which allowed them to play with the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, which you get a little bit on the cover in Avengers West Coast 80. And there were a lot of status quo changes that came out of this. The biggest one was freezing the Skrulls' ability to shapeshift for a long time, destroying their homeworld, things like that. But it's a fun big crossover, and I know they have collected it as a big trade paperback, but it's worth checking out if you ever run across it. Operation Galactic Storm. It's actually not terribly handled. Darkhawk has a big crossover with Venom and Darkhawk 13. Let's see. Of course, G.I. Joe 122. The Incredible Hulk. Peter David is doing a crossover, if I'm seeing this correctly. Yeah, Peter David's doing a crossover with X Factor because he was writing X Factor at the time. So he gets the Hulk and the Pantheon crossing over with X Factor. That's fun. I do like when writers work on multiple properties and they're able to get some natural synergy in there versus, a forced thing. And so then all the characters read like they're currently being portrayed in their normal in their normal series. Like, no one's really out of character because they're literally being written by the same guy. Or gal. Wolverine fights Namor in the book Namor 24. Oh, I remember where it was when I read this book. Punisher Warzone #1. It's John Romita Jr. And if my comic book style memory is serving me correct, this was a big leap ahead for John Romita Jr.'s artwork. Whereas I had seen him before draw X-Men. He did that late 190s era all the way through the early 200s. And now, of course, they're on X-Men. Or are they on Uncanny X-Men 286? So that would have been like 5 or 6 years earlier. He was doing that. Then he had been working on, he did the New Universe for a long time. I think kind of where New Universe is where he started to change. Spider-Man, his Spider-Man stuff was a lot smoother. This era, this Punisher Warzone stuff that he did was real blocky. It's definitely the first step towards this, I think, his modern style, which is big blocks, big framework, big action. Everything's bigger, everything's bolder, everything's more expansive. It's his Kirby, even though he's a Romita, right? But it's like Romita channel. It's Romita channeled through Kirby, and you get John Romita Jr. style in Punisher Warzone #1. And I don't think he looked back from this. So whatever changes he did here definitely carried it through. He would soon be back on Spider-Man, and that's on the adjectiveless Spider-Man book, and that's soon. I say soon. It's probably 4 years from now. And that stuff was real this style, real big, bold characters, just big stock poses, not very subtle kind of work. That's how I describe it. But yeah, Punisher Warzone. It had a nice die-fold or die-cut cover, rather. Man, NFL Super Pro #6. What? And then over in X-Men, we got X-Men 286, Archangel on the cover. X-Force 8, which technically is the first appearance of the real Domino, because she was being copycatted by Copycat. So X-Force 8 is a book that has fluctuated up and down in the back issue price market. I think it's currently settled around $10, but there was during like Deadpool 2, Zazie Beetz, where she portrayed Domino, this book popped in a weird way, because it's not Domino's first appearance, but it's Domino's first appearance, because it's revealed that Copycat had played her. And Copycat, strangely enough, is Vanessa, and Ryan Reynolds' wife, or Deadpool's wife in those movies, is, I believe, supposed to be Vanessa. Anyway, and then Jim Lee over on X-Men #6. I don't think this is a well-staged cover. It's Sabretooth and Psylocke seemingly over the dead body of Wolverine, but it's a well-drawn cover. Like, these images are kind of iconic and they look great, but I don't think it's a organized cover. But it's a fun one. And there you go. So that's it.
You were saying?
I was. And now let's get into...
Now, mass is ready.
G.I. Joe 122. Storm Shadow versus, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to say Slice, and I'm going to mean Dice. No, it's Slice. Slice is in red, Dice is in blue, or purple rather. So it's Storm Shadow versus Slice. Storm Shadow versus Slice on the cover of X-Men of G.I. Joe 122. I like it. I mean, I like these. I think I like Wildman's cover style more than I like his interiors, if that means anything. I think his covers, his interiors are fine and fun, and it might be the difference of inkers, to be frank. Randy Emberlin on inks, and I don't know that Emberlin inked the front cover, because there's a smoothness to the line. It's thin. It's a thin line, and I'm usually not a super big fan of a super thin line. There's not a lot of variation on it that I can see. I mean, that's not being fair, but it's a thinner line on the covers than it is typically on the interiors. And there's definitely more, more hatching on the characters on the inside, so therefore then the covers feel more fluid to me. They're more, they're certainly not storytelling, but they're more just the figure work seems a little smoother. But I like it. We got slices back to us, and it's funny to see these two characters in these two outfits lined up next to each other on this cover the way they are. You see how this design motif that they had on the toys at the time, where you've got the pattern on the character and then their midsection is the camouflage, or is the design of it, right? So on Slice, he's got a red gi, but right around emanating from his waistband, moving up and moving down, are these like bubbles, right? These these stylistic bubbles. And the same thing is essentially true, at least on this rendering, of Storm Shadow, where he's got a white gi, but then in the middle of his body is like the black camouflage, and then it's emanating out from his belt. If you guys look at the cover, you'll see what I'm saying there in that regard. I wonder if that was conscious choice. I mean, like they purposely said that's a look we want to go for, and I mean it's repeated throughout the book. Whenever you look at these guys, that's the way the figures looked. So yeah, it's interesting. Anyway,
Yo, Joe!
an ominous title here. It's called Transformer. Script by Larry Hama, pencils by Andrew Wildman, Rick Parker lettering, inks Randy Emberlin, Bobby Chase editor, Bob Sharon colors, and DeFalco editor in chief. So Transformer is the name, and this is this is fun because it's coming from Andrew Wildman, who certainly knows his Transformers, right? He had a massive run on Transformers while they were with us, right? So and actually, hold on one second. Yeah, and I just confirmed it. His run on Transformers would have ended back in publication dates, July of 91, so about 6 months before this, and he's been on this. So he basically rolled right out of Transformers and right over into G.I. Joe. That's a connection I probably should have made 3 months ago when he first got in the book. But yeah, so that makes sense. So I love that. That's what they call. Obviously, they're calling this Transformer on purpose. And who knows? Maybe even Larry had the idea for the story because of Andrew's work on the Transformers book. Who knows? So we open on a great big splash page with both our heavy machine gunners, Rock and Roll and Roadblock. Although only one of them is shooting. Rock and Roll is only threatening Cobra with a good time. And I mean that. There's nothing coming out of, this is Rock and Roll V2, so he's got those arm-mounted, heavy machine guns, and nothing is firing, which is kind of funny. Roadblock, though, he's not wasting any time. Roadblock is, Ma Deuce is in full effect. Yeah, speed lines, smoke on the feet. It is 1992. Faux show.
Yo, Joe!
So it's these early pages of G.I. Joe are always the name check pages. So Big Ben is clear, Dusty and Stalker too. So this is telling us all the guys that are on the team. That's the whole Brawler team. So that's name checking the ride that they were in that got blown up. And then so that's a quick panel with them, and then we get a nice mid panel to see elsewhere on the battlefield, and it's the Cobras, all the Vipers, and they're making sure we understand that as long as they hold the strong point, the Joes can't take the castle. And it's just a firefight. There's a lot of speed lines, and we're getting more and more of that into G.I. Joe. A lot of speed lines, a lot of explosions, but the Joes are there to save. Right now, the Joes' imperative is to save their friends. Who, if you remember, it got chewed up at the end of last issues, and Dusty, Stalker, and Big Ben. So that's what we're that's like the business we're taking care of on this page.
Yo, Joe!
What I like it real quick about that last page was that if you remember last issue, the continuity of getting those Vipers from the rooftop down to the bottom. Why would they go all the way down to the floor when they unpin like that continuity? Now for this issue, just doesn't exist, and that's what's kind of fun, neat about comics, in that every comic is someone's first issue. So they pick this up. You have to have no idea of what happened in the previous issue. You just know that there's a firefight. You've been filled in with who's, kind of a rough estimate of who's fighting on what side, etc. And these guys are holding it down. That's it. That's all you need to know. We're getting a little more explanation here with Duke, Flint, and Lady J. And they're kind of explaining thing that the G.I. Joe Ninja Force made it inside the Silent Temple. But an ambush is going to bring up the battle wagon, ambushing that dope mustache. So now we've got the Joe battle wagon. Toys really look like toys in these issues. That's there's another panel that when we get to it, I'll point it out. They really, really look like toys, and that's kind of fun. So Duke is, he's explaining the battle wagon is going to be the breaching element's going to take the lead. Who's riding and what? These are all name checking and toy checking for the readers and the collectors.
Yo, Joe!
Collectors. For the kids who want to play with toys. That's really, especially at that time. So inside the castle, we go back to some more ninja action, and it's Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes, and Shebang, and Dojo, and Nunchuck versus Slice and Dice, and a cadre of red ninjas. This is just a splash page glory shot of everyone kind of fighting. I love this one, though. There's a red ninja that has to identify it. He says, I recognize the styles of the two leaders. They are Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, masters of the Rishikage Ninja Clan. You need their style to identify them. And I guess they're wearing new outfits, but they're pretty high profile, especially in that crowd where red ninjas were offshoots of the clan, right?
Yo, Joe!
And the red ninjas realize that, hey, there's no dishonor if we live to fight another day, because Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes are pretty dope. So they run. And that's also when someone, who is it, Nunchuck, points out that aren't they renegades from your own clan? And Storm Shadow confirms, and it's like, well, yeah, dude, you better recognize Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, even outside of theirs. Like if they just walked in and did zero act of ninjery, you should know who they are. But they do escape. They escape through like a bolt hole in the floor. And there's a lot in this issue of, I'll say this, there's a lot of entrances and exits, right? So Larry's juggling and Andrew are juggling a lot of who's fighting where. It's a little I think it's overly complicated. I don't know. But it is a lot. It's a lot of, there's Joe's outside, there's Vipers outside, there's Vipers inside, there's Joe ninjas inside, there's red ninjas who aren't necessarily Cobra ninjas, and Slice and Dice aren't necessarily, they're related to Cobra, but they're not necessarily Cobra ninjas. And then there's other Cobras coming in from the roof on the helicopters, and remember the Vipers also came in through those battlecopters. And then Destro and Baroness are in one of the basements, or remember they called them dungeons, or was it? They said don't call them dungeons. What was that line? There was a line last issue about like not calling them dungeons because that's not a technically correct term. But anyway, they're downstairs in a getting the brainwave scan, right? So there's just a lot of pieces at play here, and I've seen Larry handle that better. Let's say that.
Yo, Joe!
All these pieces for a lot of this, including the 2 issues where the ninjas just hung off the side of a mountain, everyone is still in the same spot for a lot of this fighting, I guess is where I'm coming from. Normally, when he would have these types of chess pieces be moving, they would be going somewhere and then they would achieve that objective. These chess pieces have kind of been in the same spot for like 3 issues. I think that's the part of this that's bothering me. So yeah, the ninjas got off the wall, but then they've just been fighting in the top parapets. The Joes were on the road, but now they're still on the road. Destro and Baroness were running around the castle, and they're still running around the castle. Cobra landed some Vipers, but yet Cobra still has a landing party to land. There's these beats that just keep getting repeated issue after issue. And this is the 3rd issue after a 3-issue Destro miniseries. So what happens is this whole thing becomes a 6-issue Destro miniseries, we only got 3 issues for Snake Eyes' face, right? The graphic novel that got turned into actual Joe issues. You know, like, we didn't devote this much time into the Snake Eyes trilogy. Like, you know, and that was the life story / reinvention of / you know, breaking down and rebuilding of, you know, arguably one of the most important character on the Joe team. You know, certainly most popular. We're spending so much time just grinding on the same notes for these guys for 6 issues. I think that's a lot. So in this next page, the Cobra, where these the Hind, are these the Hind? I forget. We figured out the name of these helicopters, but it's Fang 1. It's those giant transport copters. They're flying in, and it's got Cobra Commander on his way. He gets an update from the Vipers of kind of, you know, what's going on, and that the Joes are still on the road. And again, like I was saying, the Joes are still on the road, and the ninjas are still in the roof, and, you know, etc. So the Televiper tells the Saw Viper and the Heat Viper, like, you gotta stop the Joes at all cost.
Yo, Joe!
So now we're gonna catch up on Destro and Baroness in the dungeon. And remember, Destro submitted himself to the brainwave scanner. Now, this is funny. I had guessed, remember, I read these new every week. I read them 30 years ago. I do not remember what happens next. So bear with me if I either guess incorrectly or if I sound stupid. It was like, I think this is going to happen, and then something totally different happens because, you know, it's been 30 years since I've read these. I was kind of hoping for like that reverse Superman 2 move, you know, where Superman got back into the machine and everyone on the outside of the machine got depowered and he was safe inside. That is not what's happening here. Destro is willingly giving himself up to the brainwave scanner. And what the Baroness sees on the scanner is she sees a fragment of Destro's memory, and she says, I remember this. It was on the battlements of his old castle. And he says, my eternal, how eternal is my love for you. I shall make a solemn pledge. As long as Castle Destro shall stand, I shall love you. Thing was, wasn't this just said 4 issues ago when they destroyed Castle Destro? It's not like it's, you know what I mean? Like, this is just her remembering yesterday. This has not been that long. Now that she sees it and that it's a forefront thought in his mind is what works here on this brainwashing, right? This is what helps. That true love can rise again, and it's a charming sentiment and all that stuff. It's just, it's not like this happened 40 issues ago, you know, and it was the moment he proposed to her, or you know, what have you. It just happened. So I don't know. It seems weird. It's like, yeah, I remember last week you said it, but I'm still brainwashed. So let's go.
Yo, Joe!
But having said that, it's still charming. So the Joes are attacking. They're, you know, there's some hidden anti-tank mines. The battle wagon gets knocked with one. They're just running over the brawler, which was in the way. There's a lot of just military action. And these, was it this panel? No, I think it's the next page. Yeah. But these are the pages where
Yo, Joe!
Maybe it's a couple. It's 2 pages where it's really just toys fighting toys. They're starting, for me at least, for this eye, it's starting to feel less like, you know, real, quote unquote real people, you know, being in a battle versus toys fighting toys. And frankly, to be honest, it's because a lot of the costumes of this era, let's be real, a lot of the costumes and a lot of the designs on the toys, on the vehicles and stuff, aren't very, they're not very, you know, real world based, right? You know, your Ram motorcycle, your Vamp, your Mobat, your, you know, I'll even give you, you know, your cross country's vehicle, the, it's just in my head. Even that is like, you know, big and green, and, you know, even, you know, Slaughter's Triple T tank kind of a thing. A lot of this stuff is just real, you know, with these giant toy-like cannons on the front. You know, some of the color schemes that don't really fit, you know, what you would want in, you know, kind of a military thing. And then certainly the costumes where, you know, blue and yellows, and you know, eventually we get into the neon era of G.I. Joe. Like, that stuff, not to judge it for selling toys, But when you see it in play in a book, it breaks a little bit of that agreed upon reality. That's what I mean. So when you see all this stuff, where it was a little more naturalistic, I think we would all agree it was a little more naturalistic previously. When you see it all played out in comic book, it goes, oh, these are toys having conversations. At least for me, and that's not to say it's bad. That is not knocking it. It is just, it's that agreed upon reality. That's what I'm talking about. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but it's that agreed upon that pact between the this was a book that was kind of like this for a long time, and now in its final era, in literally the last quarter of its existence, I'm talking about the Marvel G.I. Joe stuff, in its last quarter of its existence, it's kind of going, yeah, toys. So the all the Vipers are retreating, and who was he? He's I'm never gonna remember the ninja names. You guys long listeners know, I could barely remember the Dreadnoks, who was Torch and who was Buzzer and who was Ripper, and I had those figures and I liked those figures, and I wrote Cold Slither, for God's sake, and I still have to go Buzzer, Blonde. So I'll remember the names Nunchuck, Shebang, and Dojo, but I'm gonna have a hard time remembering who's who. But they so all the Cobras deck out, but Snake Eyes is like, hey man, we're here to save Destro. We don't have time to chase Cobra.
Yo, Joe!
And now we see Destro's surviving the brainwave scanner, and she says, how did you know that I'd release you? Didn't you know that I had, this is Baroness talking, I had been put through the scanner by Cobra Commander? He says, yes, but I knew that love cancels out all forms of brainwashing. And he's right. Like, this genuinely, it's I love it. I do love this advancement in their plot. I really do. I think it works well. It's funny. Like, remember what happened last week? I said I loved you. Oh my God, you did. I'm not brainwashed anymore. And that it's based around Castle Destro. I gotta be honest. We haven't spent a lot of time around Castle Destro. I don't care about Castle Destro. Seeing it destroyed 3 issues ago, whatever it was, that was the most interesting thing about quote unquote Castle Destro. Like, when growing up, I thought the Silent Castle was Castle Destro, and I think half of you listening thought that, and the other half are lying about it. So, there's a lot in this book that pins our love for Castle Destro on the advancement of this story. And I'm like, what? Anyway, so the ninjas get caught up with Destro and Baroness. And this is a great panel in the middle because Wildman he illustrates Destro's gun so nicely. That is Destro's gun. That it looks so good. That's just great. And it's, Baroness draws it off Destro's hip, and I'm assuming it's his. I think that she draws it off his hip because that's Destro's gun, and it's awesome. It's a great shot of that, and I love that it's that. It's not just a generic piece, that he took the time to draw that. Really, I genuinely think that's great. So the ninjas are stuck between a rock and a gold face. Ha ha! You like that?
Yo, Joe!
And over on that narrow road, the Joe's battle wagon is that mine that hit it. It's knocking it off the side of the road. So Lady J, this is great though. Lady J, they throw a hook on it, and she's in the whatever the small green Jeep. What was it? Again, these. I know. Listen, I know. I do a Joe podcast. I should have this stuff ready at my heels, but guess what? It's not burned into my head. What car is she driving? The Badger. That's right. She's in the Badger, and she's driving, and Duke is mansplaining it. He says, we're securing the tow cable. Throw it into low gear, Lady J. And I absolutely adore that Larry Hama has her saying, I know how to do this. That she's like, you don't have to tell me how to tow someone in a car, Duke. Don't be a jerk. Or Hawk, rather. Duke? Hawk? Am I saying Duke? Did I say Duke earlier? I meant Hawk. So that's pretty great. So they tow the battle wagon, and they get it out of the, from falling off the ravine. And so the assault on the front door still happens. This is the page I was talking about earlier that really made me feel like they were toys. having fun, which is, it's not a bad feeling. It's just real toy, with the bright blue and the bright green. Yeah, so it is a couple toys, and it's also like it's like one toy. Like there's which is how we would play, right? How many of your friends back in the day did you know that had 2 battle wagons? They had a platoon of badgers, right? You'd have one, and maybe you'd have an Striker, and and that's it, right? So one would be enough to scare your Cobra forces, and that's what's happening here, and it really works.
Yo, Joe!
More ninja fighting happening. Big splash page panels. Destro and Baroness are heading downstairs while the Joes keep Slice and Dice and the Red Ninjas occupied. And Destro is taking Baroness to, quote, show her something. And we don't know what that is. Now,
Yo, Joe!
Up above, the Cobra forces, they're shooting at them from Destro's defenses. They're shooting at the Joes. And as that's happening, the Cobra helicopters have finally caught up to the battle, and they've dropped some paralyzer tanks behind the Joes. So the Joes are literally pinched in here, which is nice. That's kind of cool. I think you follow what's going on with the illustrations. This mid panel where it's a very busy panel, so I understand why they would have cropped it, but I would have liked to have seen the impact of with the paralyzers being behind the Joes, how narrow of a pass that is, and like they're trapped in between mountains on a narrow road, and they're really like, instead of putting the camera, I don't know, like so you put the camera on the ground to capture the helicopters, but at the same token, if you put the camera above looking down, you would see the impact of having these paralyzers come up behind the Joes, where there literally is one small path. And we know intrinsically there is, because we've been following and reading the story and paying attention. But to see it, that, now they're really boxed in, and you literally have Cobras firing at them from the castle that the Joes are going on, and now there's paralyzers behind them. I would love to see what that would look like. And the Cobras are wiring some blasting caps.
Yo, Joe!
So Hawk's calling the ninja force, and he calls it. He says, "We're trapped in a murderous crossfire. Knock out that anti-aircraft gun." They're using the anti-aircraft gun to shoot down, right? So they've like lifted the levels, the Cobras. So they're shooting at the Joes with an anti-aircraft gun. And Storm Shadow, who is the chief liaison for this. It's nice to be Snake Eyes, because you can't talk. You never have to be the guy that relays the message, because no one's going to have you on the radio. So Storm Shadow has to do all the work. If I was Storm Shadow, I'd get real resentful of that. Like, I always have to work the radio just because Snake Eyes can't talk, or no one chooses to learn sign language. It's got to be my fault. Thanks a lot. So the Joes do run to go help Destro help the Joes. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The Ninja Force leaves the fight to go help the Joes. And again, this is a little bit of that. Ninja Force hasn't done anything this whole time. They've fought people, but they're constantly running towards a goal that they never actually reach in these stories. You know what I mean? They didn't reach Destro and help him. Now they're on their way to help Destro, and then they're called off to go help the Joes. And maybe that's the story that Larry, maybe that specifically is what Larry's going for, is that sometimes you're just constantly on the move and go here, go there, and you never really achieve a goal. But that's what's happening with Ninja Force, starting with hanging on the wall for 2 days.
Yo, Joe!
So Destro and Baroness, they're on these catwalks, and it's very much like, is it the pit and the pendulum that I'm thinking of? But like also, think the clock tower in Vertigo, think the steps at the end of 89 Batman, like they're climbing up, and there's a lot of gears and pulleys and levers and winches, as they're climbing up to the top of this castle parapet thing. And there's a bunch of levers up there. And Dice points out, like, what are all these gears and pulleys for? And Destro finds the seventh from the end, which makes me wonder, what do the other ones do? I really want to know what if there's at least 7, and actually there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we can see 8. Based on the spacing, I think there's 9. So what do the other 8? If one of them does to this tower what it's about to do, what do the other 8 do? And I don't know if we ever get the answer to that. But Destro, he's gonna pull a lever. Meanwhile, the Cobras hit fire in the hole. They hit that explosion, and the door pops open because the Cobras on the outside, the Vipers that were stuck fighting the Joes, they want to get back into the castle, but they can't. And the Joes, conversely, kind of want to get out, but they can't.
Yo, Joe!
Cobra Commander's yelling at the Televiper. They need the road secured. But the Joe Ninjas now have caught up with those Cobra Vipers on the roof. And Nunchuck I think is that Nunchuck? Who's the one that took the Oath of Silence? He's the one. He takes out a couple of the Vipers, and then is it Dojo and Shebang, or is it Shebang with the voice? Anyway, don't at me. So they're now in charge of these anti-aircraft defenses, and they use those defenses against the Cobra helicopters. So you see that they're pointing towards the choppers. The Joes now were able to turn at least some of their armaments back towards those paralyzers that were heading up behind them.
Yo, Joe!
And Destro now has pulled that lever, that 7th from the end lever, and we get just a couple panels of all these gears starting to move. These weak wooden staircases, they crumble. Slice and Dice fall, not to their deaths, but they fall, and so their pursuit of Destro is over. And we get it's a short transformation window. I'm not in love with, you know what, if we're leading up to this, give me more. Give me more transformation. Give me more something. And I know it's difficult to draw. I get that. But we see it starts to quiver in the first panel. The snake on the top is receding. The second panel, actually the top has popped open and there's a castle parapet. The Joes have launched their missile, their anti-aircraft missile. And then this third bigger panel, you see a view from above. You see all these changes are taking. It's not really, I don't think, my eyes, you can't really track what's happening, but all these levers and doors are opening and switching and flipping. So you do genuinely get what's happening. It's not lost on anyone. But
Yo, Joe!
You end up with another Castle Destro. And it just says it transformed into a better version of Destro's castle in Scotland. So you just have another Castle Destro. Okay. Okay. We haven't spent a ton of time here. I don't know why we care. You know what I'm saying? It's just another castle. I don't know. This doesn't, it's finely drawn. It's well done. It does not look anything like the Silent Castle. But it doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't, that was it. And now, were the Red Ninjas who Slice and Dice were talking about that were living at the castle? Because remember that first issue we got here? They were talking about this big threat that was living in the Silent Castle, this big, like as if there was a demon in the basement kind of a thing. Did that just get dropped, or was Larry just talking about the Red Ninjas? So I'm curious about. So now we still have a castle, but it's just a different castle.
Yo, Joe!
The Cobra helicopters, most of them have gotten hit with the anti-aircraft missiles. Cobra Commander realizes his dreams are dashed, but in the meantime, let's take out some Joes at the very minimum. So keep shooting, kind of a thing. And Hawk says the only way we're going to get out of this is to take the battle wagon off the road into the ravine. And so they do that. So Joes choose to drive off the side of a cliff. This is a move straight out of Fast and Furious, or rather, Fast and Furious took this from G.I. Joe. The Cobra Joes literally just went down a ravine in a car, and I've seen Vin Diesel do that in a Fast and Furious movie. It's pretty great.
Yo, Joe!
And Cobra Commander follows them. the Baroness and Destro are on their new castle, and she says it's beautiful. And she says, is this really what you meant when you told me our love would stand as long as Castle Destro? Absolutely, my dear. You should know that I always keep an ace up my sleeve. In this case, I had an entire castle up my sleeve. So, okay. So he had I don't know. And the ninjas are like, well, we're out of this fight because we can't follow Hawk down that ravine. And where did Slice and Dice go? They got away. So it's to be concluded next issue because Cobra's still chasing Hawk and those guys. So we gotta conclude that. But again, Joe Ninja Force really, really quite ineffectual. We do get a 2-page spread on Billy, and he survived the freighter, and he ran to Destro for assistance. So Billy's still hanging around. We get a nice 2-page dossier on him, which is nice. And now in Postbox from the Pit, this is a special shout out. We get a reader putting together a Tyrone theory. Hashtag Tyrone lives. Hashtag justice for Tyrone. Talking about Firefly. Says, I'm grateful to you. This is from Daniel Devereaux. Address withheld by request. Daniel, you're in our hearts here. I am grateful to you because you are bringing back my favorite bad guy, Firefly. I thought he was dead, but you gave me a hint of hope when you supplied a dossier in him in the back. Remember, that's what we said. Why would they do a dossier if he was going to actually be alive or be dead? I know how he got out alive too, says Daniel Devereaux. Cobra Commander was unaware of Tyrone's presence on the ship, and Firefly put Tyrone's dead body in his uniform, making it look like he was dead. So I love this theory where even in death, Tyrone is the most useful character in the G.I. Joe universe. But I want a universe where Tyrone makes it out alive. Justice for Tyrone. We've also got a letter here from just straight up Leo from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. No last name, just straight up Leo. Wayne Johnson out of Linden, Alabama. Greg Swanson, rather, out of Sterling, Colorado. And Jim Pike from Delray Beach, Florida. Jim Pike was mourning Fireflies. But Jim Pike doesn't have the optimism that Daniel Devereaux does. And maybe Jim Pike just has a little more respect for Tyrone than our friend Daniel Devereaux. But that's it, gang. That's all for me and G.I. Joe number 122. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you. And now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.